Good evening and welcome to CYC News for the 20th of May 2018 and the 13th of Bishan's 17:34 AM. I'm Mira Gergis. In today's headlines, Israel destroys Gaza tunnel, boosts troop numbers ahead of expected protests. Israel defends Gaza crackdown as Palestinians bury their dead. As votes come in, Iraqi PMs hold on, power looks shaky. Iranian Foreign Minister visits Russia and China to try to save nuclear deal. Ebola outbreak in Congo enters new phase as it spreads to large city. Antoine Griezmann, masterclass guides Atletico Madrid to Europa League title. But first, to Israel, with Israeli military destroyed a tunnel in northern Gaza with an airstrike, according to Lieutenant Colonel Jonathan Conricus. The Israel Defense Forces, IDF, spokesman said the 1-kilometer tunnel was only meters away from the border fence near the Erez crossing into Israel, and a short distance away from kibbutz. This is the sixth tunnel destroyed in the past 6 months. Lieutenant Conricus said the tunnel took months to build and that the military had been tracking its construction for a number of weeks. The Israeli Defense Minister, Avigdor Lieberman, tweeted, "Hamas is spreading messages of its desire for a long-term ceasefire, but actually digs terror tunnels into the territory of the State of Israel. We're not buying this bluff. We will continue, like this evening, to strike the terror infrastructure." In a statement, Hamas slammed Israel after the strike on the tunnel, saying, "The Israeli bombardment of the northern Gaza Strip is a miserable and failed attempt to prevent the participation of our masses in the major March of Return and to break the siege on May 14th. However, the destruction of the tunnel comes before what's expected to be a volatile week in Israel and the Palestinian territories. The US will officially open its embassy in Jerusalem in a move that is expected to spark protests across the region. And the Muslim month of Ramadan also starts this week, which regularly brings a spike in tensions between Israelis and Palestinians. Israel says demonstrations are orchestrated by Hamas, the militant group that controls Gaza. Rioters in Gaza damaged the Kerem Shalom crossing, which is the only facility used to transfer goods and fuel into Gaza, forcing the crossing's closure. Since they began in March, more than 50 Palestinians have been killed by Israeli forces, according to a CNN account based on figures from the Palestinian Ministry of Health. No Israeli soldiers have been killed or injured. And further in the Gaza riots, thousands of Palestinians gathered Tuesday for the grim task of burying the 60 protesters killed by Israeli troops at the Gaza border, as Israel faced international condemnation over the deaths. Funerals took place across Gaza the preceding day Israeli troops fired on Palestinians gathered at the border to protest the controversial relocation of the US Embassy from Tel Aviv to Jerusalem. The Palestinian Health Ministry said 60 people were killed on Monday and another 2 died in clashes on Tuesday. United Nations Secretary-General Antonio Guterres was profoundly alarmed by Israel's actions. The British government called for an independent inquiry, expressing concern about the volume of live fire used by Israeli forces. But the United States expressed strong backing for Israel, blaming the deaths on Hamas, the Islamist group that controls Gaza and which encouraged the protests. Nikki Haley, the US ambassador to the United Nations, stated at a UN Security Council meeting, "Make no mistake, Hamas is pleased with the results from yesterday. I ask my colleagues here in the Security Council, who among us would accept this type of activity on your border?" She praised Israel for its restraint and accused Hamas of stoking violence, long before the controversial decision to move the US Embassy from Tel Aviv to Jerusalem. Most of the dead were killed by Israeli fire, after troops used tear gas and live rounds to try to disperse several crowds, totaling approximately 35,000 as Palestinians gathered at the border. More than 2,700 Palestinians suffered injuries in the clashes, nearly half of them due to live fire, according to the Palestinian Health Ministry, which said this was the deadliest day in Gaza since the 2014 war. To other news. Votes are being counted after Iraq's weekend parliamentary election, and at first glance it appears that Prime Minister Haider al-Abadi's coalition lags behind those of two other influential Shia leaders. More than 90% of the votes have been counted in 10 of Iraq's 18 provinces, and preliminary official results show the coalition led by Shia cleric Muqtada el-Sadar's bloc is ahead, followed by the alliance led by Hadi el-Amiri, who commanded Shia militias during the fighting against ISIS. Abadi's Victory Alliance is third, followed by that of his predecessor Nouri el-Maliki. In distant fifth is Ayad Alawi, a Shia politician who once served as interim prime minister of Iraq after Saddam Hussein was deposed, according to Iraq's Electoral Commission. The provinces counted so far are largely Shia, and votes from the northern and northwestern provinces were still being processed. Abadi, in a bid to appeal to a wider group of voters, included candidates from all 18 provinces in his alliance and visited regions where Shia politicians have rarely campaigned. Iraqi election authorities were expected to announce final results this week. Abadi, who'd been at the helm of the battle that rooted ISIS from its strongholds in Iraq, may now have to negotiate with his chief rivals to retain power. Iraqis had voiced their unhappiness with the political status quo, and many said they didn't intend to vote because the majority of the leading candidates were familiar faces who'd promised change in the past but had failed to deliver. In Russia, Iranian Foreign Minister Mohammad Javad Zarif touched down in Moscow as part of a series of international diplomatic meetings aimed at saving the Iran nuclear deal following the United States' withdrawal. Zarif will be discussing the agreement with his Russian counterpart, Foreign Minister Sergei Lavrov. It follows a visit by the Iranian diplomat to Beijing on Sunday, where he stressed the importance of keeping the accords, which were signed in 2015 with the aim of both halting Tehran's nuclear ambitions and stimulating the country's economy. According to Russian state media agency TASS, Lavrov and Zarif will discuss the possibility of preserving the Iran nuclear deal. Moscow has previously stated its strong support for the agreement. US President Donald Trump announced on May 8 the US would be withdrawing from the deal, which was signed under former President Barack Obama, saying it was defective at its core. Trump also said he planned to reintroduce the highest level of economic sanctions on Iran. But other countries around the world, including Germany, France, and the United Kingdom, have said they would like to keep the original deal effective, known as the Joint Comprehensive Plan of Action. In Beijing, Zarif met with the Chinese Foreign Minister Wang Yi, who reiterated Beijing's support for the deal. Wang stated that China will take an objective, fair and responsible attitude, keep communication and cooperation with all parties concerned, and continue to work to maintain the deal, asserting the agreement was hard-earned. In health news, an Ebola outbreak in the Democratic Republic of Congo has entered a new phase after it spread to a large city. According to the country's health minister, Dr. Oli Ilanga Kalenga, the World Health Organization confirmed the new case of Ebola virus disease has been confirmed in Wangara, a city of nearly 1.2 million people in Equator province in northwestern Congo. The spread of the virus from rural areas into a city has raised fears. It could quickly spread and become harder to control. A total of 44 cases of hemorrhagic fever have now been reported, including 23 deaths, according to the health ministry. 3 cases have been confirmed with laboratory tests. Until now, the cases and deaths were reported from the rural Bikoro health zone, allowing authorities to attempt ring-fencing vaccinations in the affected areas. A newly confirmed case in a densely populated part of the country will complicate attempts to control the outbreak. The UN agency is also partnering with the non-governmental organizations to ensure that health facilities are ready to treat patients in isolation wards. The Department of Health first reported the outbreak, the ninth the country has faced in the past 4 decades. And in sport, Antoine Griezmann's Stardust guided Atletico Madrid to a third Europa League title as the Spanish club outclassed Marseille on a memorable night in Lyon. The Frenchman, who was born just 70 kilometers from the final venue, scored goals either side of half-time, before captain Gabi put the icing on the cake with a third late on. Marseille started the game well, and unfortunate to see a Costas Mitroglou header hit the post in the second half. But the French side were comfortably second best all night. If this was to be Griezmann's final game in an Atletico shirt, then he certainly made it one for the fans to remember. And that's all for CYC News. A reminder that you can watch this news bulletin again throughout the week on YouTube. I'm Mira Gurgis from the CYC studios in Sydney, Australia. Have a good night.